guys. Good morning, Sexplorers. Thank you for joining us on our Monday morning live show about sexual health. I'm one of your co-hosts, Dr. Cami Hurst. I have a private practice in Meridian, Idaho. My training is in clinical sexology, sex therapy, and marriage and family therapy. And this is my awesome friend, Braxton Dutson. Please introduce yourself, all your letters, all your credentials.
Yeah. Well, and when I speak with individuals who speak Spanish, I actually introduce myself as Braxton Dutson because in Spanish, Dutson is way too hard to say.
Just go with a C. Okay.
Yeah, I love it. So I'm Braxton Dutson. I am a certified sex therapist, a licensed clinical social worker, and yeah, I mean, I don't have the doctor side of thing yet, but Cami, you've been tempting me to go down that route.
Do it.
Do it.
A lot of work, but I don't regret it. It was a great ride.
So I'm one of the things that I do that I've been really excited about is I actually have a webinar that's come out about what to do and how to manage being a parent if your child stumbles upon or is seeking out pornography.
Awesome.
So that course is called Help. My child just looked at pornography. Now what? So if you're interested in that, you can always email sexplorerspodcast@gmail.com, birdsandbeastpodcast@gmail.com, or even me, Braxton, at thehealinggroup.com. And I can send over that link to be able to help you find that and take that course. So that's kind of the new thing that's been going on for me. How about for you, Cami? Do you have anything going?
Yeah, I'm offering CEUs for any therapists out there who'd like to increase their sexual health competency. So it's 8 hours of CEUs for professional credits offered by ASECT. So if you're interested in certification, it can go toward that. If not, it just goes toward your state licensure. And I'm going to do 3 or 4 rounds of that this year. My next CE course starts in April. So April 10th. So email me at cami@camihurst.com if you're a licensed therapist and interested in 8 CEUs of sexual health competency.
And I got to say that if you are even thinking about being a sex certified, get these. The certification, the CEs don't ever expire. Cami's an awesome teacher. And at the same time, you've got, it goes towards your license. There's really nothing to lose. I didn't know you were a provider. That's so exciting, Cami.
Yes, that's something I took on in 2023 is got certified as a provider of CEUs through ASECT. So yeah.
Right on. Well, that's exciting. I've got other things coming out with the podcast, but we've got this that's going on today. I'm real excited because we're going to be going over the some questions from you, the viewers, the listeners. Super excited.
Yeah, every 2 or 3 episodes, we're going to take in questions that you guys submit and answer them here live on our show. You can also comment on Facebook or YouTube live. We'll throw those up if you've got questions as we're discussing these questions. And send those into sexplorerspodcast@gmail.com. These ones today, I do want to give credit where we got them. I have a friend and colleague named Daniel Burgess who runs a really great private group. And a lot of these questions we pulled off, they're anonymous from that group. You might want to check it out. He's created a great space for people.
Mm-hmm. And one of them, it wasn't emailed directly to Sexplorers Podcast, but it was emailed to me, which is, I really appreciate the person that decided they wanted to remain anonymous, which is great. Mm-hmm. And if you have a question or you have a follow-up question on the show today, be sure to send us a message. And if you want to remain anonymous too, because sometimes these questions could be like, I don't want that out to everybody. Just write in there anonymous and we won't click on it. We won't, because we can pop things up at the bottom like this and it'll actually have your name posted to it. Such as one of my dear friends, Casey Rhodes, hopped on and said, Braxy, congratulations. So she didn't put anonymous, so I'm going to put her on here. That's how it would show up. So if you want to remain anonymous, we can read those without it coming up on screen. So that's just a little disclaimer. That's also in the show notes here. Okay. Well, do we want to jump right into them?
Yeah, let's do it. Yeah, I think we're going to try to get through 3 in an hour. We'll see how well we do.
It seems like an easy task, but we're gonna say it's not. It's actually not. There's a lot to these questions.
Yeah.
All right. I know that we kind of named them 1 through 3. I put them in here and it kind of got rearranged. Do we want to start out with the I'm nervous, I'm gay? Should we start out with that one?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So the question, I'm going to read the question, but this is going to be at the bottom here so we can see and identify what space we're at.
Mm-hmm.
But the question that was posed is, hi, Braxton. I watch men having sex for porn sometimes. So essentially what he's saying is for sexual imagery and sexual stimulation, he watches men having sex. I'm really nervous that makes me gay. I don't have any feelings for men. I've never wanted to have sex with a man. I don't know. I just find it erotic seeing men have sex sometimes. Is it just a matter of time until I'm actually gay? So it's a really, really great question. And I actually get that in my office from time to time. People asking if that is if this is just a stepping stone towards something that they don't know, but they are. What are some of your first thoughts on that, Cammie?
Well, if any viewers saw me looking down, I'm taking notes. I can't get the therapist out of me. So I'm always writing my thoughts down. I'm not ignoring what's happening. What's happening is very relevant and important. I'm here and I'm present. But I'm a note jotter. So a couple questions. One, at the root of the question is maybe a lack of education about orientation. Can something make us gay? Can something make us straight? Can something influence our orientation or not? I heard that as one of the core questions.
Mm-hmm.
And then the second core question was, I'm not exactly sure what my eroticism means about me.
Yes.
And what stood out to you?
Those ones, I would say the erotic side is the part that stood out to me the most, Cammie. I love that first question though, of like, okay, so what is this? What's the line between where I start being made straight, being made gay, bi? Usually we start getting that third thing in there. So I think we ought to touch on that. But the one that stood out to me most was the erotic side of things. Mm-hmm. I find it erotic. I don't know. It's just, it's something that, responds to me. So as I think of those, I often find people feeling distress or curiosity or confusion about what they find erotic. Oh, mm-hmm. That shouldn't turn me on. That should turn me on. Oh, it's good that this turns me on. There's a lot of judgments around erotic templates.
There are a lot of judgments around erotic templates, and our mind and our genitals, we've got this biological part of ourself that's sexual, but we've got this mental part of our self that is sexual. And often our body doesn't know what's moral or not moral, meaning, or what our values are. It will respond. This even has come up in questions in the past when there has been assault, and legislatures before we'd done enough advocacy about sexual health had said, well, if your body responded, you enjoyed it, so this wasn't a crime. And it's just so sad because our bodies will respond to protect us, even if we don't want what's happening. Our bodies respond to sexual material, whether or not it lines up with our orientation. Our bodies will respond. And so it's kind of this question of not understanding how our body and our mind work together as our sexual self.
Yeah, the sexual non-concordance, sexual concordance, mm-hmm. And then what turns us on, what doesn't turn us on. I think when we're talking about sexual non-concordance, that may, I don't know. Do you think that falls under this situation where he's turned on by something? It doesn't sound like it's necessarily sexual non-concordance. He's okay with being turned on that way. He's worried that it means something more.
Right. So not related directly to this question, but just something that people don't realize, that they assume that their arousal system will always operate within their value system. And that's a fairly big myth. And that's all I was trying to really address with that example of non-concordances. Our bodies will swallow just like you took a drink.
Yeah. Accurate.
What's in your cup is according to your values and not according to your values. You can, our bodies have functions.
Yes.
And it's interesting that this came in from a male listener, because I get this question in my office more often with females who talk about being turned on by other women, who talk about enjoying female on female storylines or movies, shows, porn, imagery. And I'm going to reach behind me and grab a book.
Sweet. I always wonder if people have actual books on their shelf or if it's just the the background. Yours looks good.
No, these are actual books behind me. This one, Sexual Fluidity by Lisa Diamond. So Lisa Diamond is University of Utah. This is her research about sexual fluidity and talks about this idea that many of us have some degree of fluidity. Women in research seem to have a little bit more fluidity than men, but I don't think that's biological. I think that's cultural there. And, talking about orientation can neither be created nor changed. And that many of us do experience some degree of flexibility or fluidity in our orientation. Not 100 degrees, right? Conversion therapy is illegal for adults in states. We cannot change someone's orientation. All of the research backs that up. Not enough of our laws back it up yet. But thank you. That was an awesome graphic. Pull that back up.
Yeah, I wanted to share. I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, let's do this. This is fantastic.
One thing about this, so is Lisa Diamond, I think, does a wonderful job of taking this from the Kinsey scale. So this is the Kinsey scale. And she breaks that down even more into being like, it's a little bit beyond 0 through 6, but this is a great simplified method of saying exactly what you're talking about. Or if we can look at 0 would be exclusively heterosexual, like I have 0 type of desire or experience or orientation towards being homosexual. I would say that, and then on this side at 6, where I'm exclusively homosexual and I have 0 movement towards being heterosexual. I think that the distress and the confusion often lies for individuals at 1 or 2, where they're like, oh, I'm interested in this. I often refer to people saying that this would be kind of where you'd see threesomes happening, where one person may be like, nope, I'm not interested in the opposite sex, but I'm interested in 2 of the opposite sex being with me and them being together, which involves someone needing to be on a scale of 1 to 2 to 3 to 4 to 5, or if there are 6 moving to 5 to 4 to 3 to 2 to 1, there's got to be some form of orientation crossover, if you will. And it's not just, oh, I need a person that's heterosexual or a person that's gay and then someone that's bi. It doesn't go into those 3 segments. And I love that as you added to that, orientation's not created or altered in that way. It's really just kind of discovering yourself and what you're comfortable with.
Yeah, and it's a big spectrum. It's not either or. It's not black and white. It's not one of the other. Most humans have some degree of flexibility in their eroticism at some point. And it can change over the course of our lifetime. I like this. I'm wondering if you're able to pull up the Klein grid, which is something else I use with people who are trying to discover orientation.
Let me see.
Instead of the Kinsey scale, the Klein grid talks about attraction in, I think, 5 categories, where our attraction template isn't black or white either. It's not I am attracted or I am not attracted to you. And we need this kind of flexibility. If anyone wants to attempt a long-term relationship, we're going to need to be able to adjust our attraction as we age and to not rely on a really fixed template of attraction of the best 20 in our 20s. Yeah, here we go. Okay. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It's 7. I was wrong. So this is the Klein grid where it talks about attraction existing in a sexual attraction. Does that do anything for you? Sexual behavior, does that do anything for you? Sexual fantasies, which I think is what this individual is talking about. I have some sexual fantasies, or it turns me on. Then there's your emotional preference. He said, I have no desire to be connected to a man. Okay, yeah. Social preference. I have no desire to have a relationship with a man. Okay. Fifth, heterosexual, homosexual lifestyle. I'm not interested in upending my life and pursuing a relationship with another man. Okay. Self-identification. I don't identify in any way. Okay, so there's all these areas that we look at when we're trying to understand our own erotic template and orientation is in question. I like to look at this Klein grid. And I find that when I work with mixed orientation couples, we use this a lot of where can we build resiliency and where can we build compatibility within these 7 areas of attraction.
Oh, I love that. That's really cool, especially because when you start looking at it, it's not like, oh, there's just 7. There's 7, essentially times 7, because you have or probably even more. I'm not the best at math, but
me either. I'm married to an accountant. He does all the numbers. I stay away from them.
But there's a lot of options, and I love that it brings the past, present, and then ideal into the scenario too. That your past doesn't mean that it is your current, and your current doesn't mean that this is forever, and it also isn't this foreshadowing beforehand. So a lot of really important things to take on there, I believe. So if I were working with this individual, one, I would start exploring what things are attractive to him, like what he finds erotic. And then I'd also probably have him read Tell Me What You Want by Justin Lehmiller.
I have that one behind me too.
Sweet. That one's a fascinating book about desire. And not desire, erotic templates and what people find erotic.
And fantasy. And should I be threatened by my partner's fantasies? Should I be threatened by my own fantasies? Do we have to live out fantasies? It's a great book. How do we incorporate fantasies? How do we not? Yeah, it's fantastic.
So wonderful. And oftentimes just giving, start working through what clinical or what sex therapists typically look at is called the PLISSIT model. So it is for visual idea. It's a PLISSIT, which essentially stands for permission, limited information. So getting some information about the situation, which we just provided, specific suggestions, which I think we're kind of moving into, and it's like what he could do, and then intensive therapy. So if there's some trauma involved or something that started to come up through assessment, then we'd work through intensive therapy. But oftentimes I find that people in this space with this question is needing permission, needing some information to know that he's not this
not unusual
enigma. Yeah,
not unusual.
And that it's okay to act in the way that he wants to. Now, whether or not this is okay within a relationship, that gets into some other conversations that we can have on this at another time. But as for right now, it's so you see it and it turns you on. That doesn't mean much more than that you can take from it, but there's not, I don't know, that's kind of my take for it. Cammie, what would you end up saying to him?
Yeah, I think that's kind of like a myth test, right? People who have no sexual health education or very little, and they're like, oh, I like gay porn, so I must be gay. It's like that. It's not that simple necessarily. And I'll do a lot of exploration when this is being dealt with in therapy. We are therapists, but we are not anybody's therapist who's watching this, right? We're so, yep. But when I am working with someone in therapy, another question that comes up often is, what's the point of view in this fantasy? Meaning, are you the receiver? Are you the giver? Like, there's often this question that I have discussions with female clients who really enjoy female erotica or female-bodied individuals is, do you want to be with them or do you want to be them? And many straight women have a fantasy of being this incredibly sexy, well, I don't know. What they see that they enjoy is actually something that they want to be, not something they want a partner that's with them to be. I'm not sure if I'm being clear.
I think one way that
less attractive, or I find this attractive, or I'm really attracted to this. And it's like, is that the energy that you wish you had in your own sexual personality? Or is that something you want a partner to have? And we'll untangle why the fantasy is meaningful to them. And for some straight women, it's, oh, I want to be that, not I want to be with them.
I would say that's a great description of it. The other part that I think that I hear in particular from men and their experience with sexual imagery happens to be that it's not so much. Oftentimes there's this like action of like, oh, I'd like that done to me. A lot of what I see is, man, I'd like to experience that desire from my partner.
I want someone to want me the way that person is wanting.
They're excited. There's an energy or a feeling behind it. Now, that's not for everybody, but I would say that comes up a lot within it, or that they imagine themselves experiencing the action. So again, a lot of components to what is stimulating and what your mind does with the stimulus.
Yeah.
Well, I hope that clears up that for that individual.
Yeah, me too.
You want to move on to the next one?
Yeah.
All right. Okay, we're going to talk about masturbation and good girl, good boy syndrome. Okay, so the full question is, my wife has just recently entered the realm of masturbation and is still really struggling with the good girl syndrome brought on by sexually misinformed childhood and adolescence. She enjoys the opportunity if she can talk herself into it, but it's still difficult to get into the headspace. I love her so deeply, and I'm glad she is finally allowing herself to be loved, but my support falls short of matching the relatability of a woman. And so that's part one to the question. We can move to the good boy situation in a second. Does that sound good?
Yeah.
Okay. So when I think of the good girl, good boy syndrome, especially when it comes to masturbation, I first start moving into what's been taught. So already things that I'm picking up on this are that they had misinformation or lack of information as a child, as a teenager, and most likely young adult. There are some values that were centered around there, either values untaught or values taught. And then we've got growing up in a society where I kind of keep thinking of it as these two sides of the Madonna and the horror complex, that one is this female person that is lovely and desirable. I kind of think of Belle on Beauty and the Beast. It's just this, she reads, she does these things. She's such this desirable, like Gaston.
Incredibly gentle and domestic and self-sacrificing and kind and
cares. She cares so much for her father, cares for, like, she's a caring type. There's not a lot of sexuality given to her besides the books that she's reading, and it's like, oh, the love, it's very much in love. And then you've got the other side, which would be prostitution, or the sexually maybe more assertive woman, and one that just loves sex. And those two oftentimes are pitted against each other in a very different way, or like on opposite sides of a spectrum.
You can be one or the other.
Yep. And you can only have one.
You can be the saint or the slut, and everybody loves the saint.
Oh, I love that one. The saint, or okay, I don't love that concept, but saint or slut sounds much. I've never quite understood Madonna because I just think of the singer.
Oh, I think it's more Renaissance, right?
Very much, but I'm like,
virgin.
Oh no, Madonna kind of embodied both of those.
Yeah, we have to travel a little bit further in history for the origin of that complex, right?
What about you? What did you take from it?
Gosh, it can come from so many sources, this good girl syndrome too. I think, one source, it can be purity culture, but I've worked with plenty of people who were non-religious and still felt like there was this choice between being a saint or being a slut. And those messages came from current culture too. We are not kind to sex workers. We are, in our culture, when we think about people who are seen as having very low value, sex workers are there, people who are over-sexualized. So it can come from our culture. It can also come from our family, even if there's not a religious component of what's okay, being polite, of what we expect from women. And so I don't want to pinpoint this as coming only from one direction. But it is that idea that I cannot be a good person and be sexual. And it often will come up later in life when people have attempted to be sexual in a committed relationship or as an adult and have this block of, why can't I get there? Why can't I lean into desire? I've got an internal conflict around this. I've never incorporated sexuality as part of my personality or part of my identity. I've only focused on my intellectual self or my spiritual self or my social self, that I've really put value into those. And I have made completely unimportant the sexual side of myself. I've never integrated sexuality as part of my personality, part of my wholeness, or part of my goodness. And so that's what good girl syndrome is. And it also applies to boys. I've had several clients that were male and stuck here. I have no idea how to incorporate sexuality as part of my goodness. Even that term that I use with people, they're like, what are you talking about? Like, that's so incongruent.
Absolutely. Especially when I love that you're talking about the incongruence between it, because it just there's not been that allowance, really not the allowance. And it's so, the one thing I think of whenever as I'm hearing you talk about this, and we'll see if it even pulls up, but this is the one I think of when we're talking about this. This is in culture. If you go to a dance, a wedding, anywhere, you're going to hear this song. And I hope the sound comes through.
I love the music loving side of you. I love that you bring this in. This is awesome.
I'm all about this. Oh, it's not going to go through the rest of it. I wasn't sure if it would or not, but essentially, yeah, lady in the street. But then he completes the. Whoa, I didn't know we could do that. That's kind of cool. Lady in the street, but a freak in the bed is the quote that Ludacris is stating there. And the reason it's like, Braxton, why do you keep bringing this up? Ultimately, when we go through life consistently hearing these undertones, that's this much of a song. And from that, it's like, oh, that's kind of that's what we want. That's the statement. We want a lady in the streets, but a freak in the bed. And super popular song, very popular from the 2000s. So when I think of working with somebody or trying to support her in exploring what you were talking about, of kind of the dual or the duality that can show up here, is oftentimes I start leaning more into mindfulness. Again, going back to some of the permission, limited information, and specific suggestions there. And a lot of times this can turn into more of an intensive therapy, depending on how ingrained that experience can be for the person. This isn't just for women either. I see this with men frequently.
Yeah. And I see we have this conversation often about sexual shame, and that's the idea that we're ashamed we are sexual. We're not sure if we're okay. But I think the other side of that same coin is, I don't know that I'm sexual, because the shame has been so covert instead of overt. And so when I'll have one person who's, I'm so ashamed of my sexuality, I haven't integrated it. And then another client who's like, I don't have a sexuality, I haven't integrated it. It's the other side of the same coin, this inability to integrate our sexual self as part of our goodness. And I see it as an existential crisis. I don't know if you're a fan of existential therapy, but I'm a fan of existential therapy. Mm-hmm. And they talk about these 3 existential crises we all go through as humans. One of those is isolation from the self. Mm-hmm. And I see good girl or good boy syndrome through this lens of existential therapy, of this is a form of being isolated from this part of yourself.
I couldn't agree more. I think that that's a great way to look at it. So in integrating and trying to support this,
Yeah,
I do a lot of internal family systems theory when it comes to the good boy, good girl syndrome of
I like that.
what we're being. So I love the existential side of things. And then when I start thinking of integrating, I start wondering like, well, who is speaking here? And what's coming up? What is the protection from? And oftentimes there is a protector, someone that is saying you shouldn't do this or trying to shut things down.
I have the
Well,
book. Keep going.
and I love that we're pulling up books because I've got a book too. No bad parts. And then I've got Better Sex Through Mindfulness. So I'm excited. The thing that I would think of when it comes to the no bad parts is recognizing all the different parts of you internally that are coming up for this experience of masturbation and this view of masturbation or sexual expression. And oftentimes being able to hear and see those parts come up can be hard to do. And so recognizing, this is where I bring in the Lori Brotto, the book Better Sex Through Mindfulness. She talks in here about a raisin and essentially going through, I shouldn't have lost that place, but going through the raisin experience where they would have these women get a single raisin, but they would call it an object. Look at the object and recognize it. Start looking through the, what texture there is. Can you hear anything from the raisin? When you put it up to your lips without opening your mouth, what happens? And body's response from salivating to memories to thoughts. Like there's a lot that can come from just a single piece of food. And then putting it in your mouth and rolling it around your mouth without eating or biting, and then taking a single bite and noticing the flavors that come from that, and what your desires are and what you are holding back from. All these things can play into one single raisin, and recognizing that we can do the same when it comes to ourself. What does it feel like to touch your face? What does it feel like when you're getting into a space where you're going to experience sexual pleasure? What holdbacks do you have? What excitement? Where does your mind go? All of those things can be really supportive, and you can start to hear and see these, I shouldn't do this. Oh man, this is exciting. Or, this feels like, and we can start incorporating even what we talked about last week with those 4-dimensional wheel or the mindfulness. But I'm curious what comes up for you when you've got the book there with no bad parts.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of the theme for this podcast is Sexplorers, and mindfulness really is at the root of any type of exploration. And what makes mindfulness is the idea to stay curious without judgment. And we have a ton of sexual judgment that we've been indoctrinated with just as humans from many sources. And it's difficult as a human, an adult, to relearn putting off judgment, staying curious, and just noticing what's there for us. And that's what, this wife is trying to do when she's starting to masturbate, to overcome, maybe to learn more about her sexual self, to maybe overcome this good girl syndrome. Is the masturbation is the raisin. It's what happens to me with this kind of touch. Wait, what happens to me with this kind of touch? How does my body respond to this idea? What if I think about this? Does my body respond? And it's really not a practice about, if we're doing this mindfully, then it's not about only pleasure. Some people get stuck in their minds of I'm being selfish, or, the Puritan idea that pleasure for pleasure's sake is worthless. It's frivolous. It's not a worthy pursuit. But what we're talking about here, which we can have a different discussion, I think pleasure for pleasure's pursuit is one of the fantastic things about being a human. But in this state of mindfulness, we can't explore and be the expert of our sexual self unless we really take some time to learn about ourselves, learn what our body does with certain ideas, learn what our mind does with certain contexts and situations.
Absolutely. So I think when we in supporting this person, so it's coming from a partner to coming from the partner to the female partner and identifying how can I be supportive. So I think the question within that is like we've talked a lot about how that kind of shows up. In being a supportive partner, it can be hard not to become prescriptive of, hey, it's okay. It's okay for you to do this. It's okay for you to do that. That starts to bring us into a fixing cycle. And I encourage people not to move into the fixing cycle, although we really want to. We really want to, because we want to, maybe the partner experiences masturbation in a whole different way and doesn't want this pain to be with their partner, or it feels like a way that they could even come closer together, which is a possibility. And trying to fix is not helpful. Oftentimes I refer to the person being the master of their own experience. And so asking the question, how can I help, is a little too broad. But if you start to dig into a little bit more of a specific open-ended question, so don't dive right into the yes or no's, because they may not know. This is exploratory typically for someone that's a good girl, good boy, that I've seen. But recognizing that you can ask a question such as, hey, what is this like for you to explore? I want to understand how you're experiencing this. What is what's exciting? What isn't exciting? What thoughts do you have? Is there anything that I might be able to do to set the mood for you better? Would you like me to bring home a different candle? Should we go shopping for candles? Oftentimes being able to help, instead of focusing on what touch do you need, if we can broaden it out a little bit more to what environment do you need for you to feel comfortable in exploring yourself and stepping into this maybe uncomfortable space, to be there, to be supportive, that you're still there for them. Because oftentimes we're worried if we're not a good girl or a good boy, that there's a big consequence. We lose a partner, we lose connection, we lose something. And if you can be there to be supportive without trying to fix, I think that can help a lot of individuals, but avoid some of the temptation to go, did that work? Did it not? Do we need to buy you vibrators? Do you want me to touch you there? What else would you need? Oh, just try it. Did you try it today? Those can be tempting to dive into.
Yeah, let this be your partner's experience and don't co-opt it. A lot of people working through good girl or good boy syndrome have come from a place of people pleasing, and they do things because other people want them to. And we don't want this to be that, is what I'm hearing you say. We don't want this exploration to be, I'm doing this because my partner would really like me to do this. Yeah. Most growth is going to come from, I deserve this for me, and I'm going to learn about me. And sometimes when a partner has wanted you to sexually develop yourself so long so that they could enjoy a more sexually developed partner, that's not good motivation for change. And I've worked with several clients who are hesitant to sexplore because they don't trust it will be theirs. They worry it will be co-opted by their voyeuristic partner. And I'm not blackballing anyone, always good partners. These are always good people. But they worry that this development will be gobbled up, that it won't be theirs. And so this emerging sexual development that this woman's enjoying, I've seen a lot of women almost, we're going to use the bell analogy, I guess, treat it like that rose with a glass cover over it. It's like, don't touch it, it's so fragile, I'm so scared I'm going to lose it, or or you're going to gobble it all up and it won't be about me anymore, it will still be about you. And these are the issues I work with daily in my office, this tension of, can I have a sexual side of myself? And then when I want to, can I be the authority of sharing it with you? Yeah. Or are you still in charge of this?
Right. And I think that adding on to that is, with all intentions, sex for most individuals feels like this, it's kind of in the forbidden space. And so it can easily feel like, if you've ever been to a water park where they have those slides that, there's a point of no return. You can't grab the sides, you can't stop because you're essentially in a free fall. Mm-hmm. And I think sexploration in this way can often feel scary to think that that I wouldn't be able to have control. My partner would, or that I would like this so much that I wouldn't have control over myself and I wouldn't be able to say no or yes. And acknowledging some of those, because oftentimes there is those consequences at the end, or they feel like there is, that a deity will be upset, or that a partner, or that you will not be satiated eventually, and that you will go through this. It's eventually not going to be enough, and then I'll eventually be doing something against my values. And people have values, and they follow those values on a typical basis from what I see.
Mhm.
So
Yeah. So I love that. I mean, we've framed what this person can do, make sure that they're not trying to co-opt that experience, that they're being really patient, that they're allowing their partner to learn about themselves and then share with them on the timing of the explorer.
yeah,
Um,
absolutely. So going to the second part to this question, I would say that this good boy syndrome, the specific questions there were, what would you say it looks like? And what are good ways to overcome it? And I would say that we've spent some really good time in this episode on ways to overcome it. I don't know that it changes significantly whether you're male or female. Um, Oftentimes, I would say the main difference I've seen when it comes to good boy syndrome is typically I would see that the male individual is already masturbating, and is not so much like, how do I do this, but more of like, I've been supposed to stop this my entire life because it's been against a value in my family and religion and something like that. And now that I'm trying to let myself do that, I feel dirty, bad, like I'm going to be out of control. Often a big fear there. So that would be one of the changes I would say within that. But I think we've talked a lot about being able to accept where you're coming from, identify your values, identify under what situation you may feel like, when would I break this value system? And then also allowing yourself to go through what it feels like to move through emotion without judgment, or move through this masturbation or experience without judgment, and allow yourself to be who you feel like you are, and then be able to process that. Sometimes it's best to work through that with a therapist. But do you have any thoughts on that?
I had a couple thoughts. One was, we are incredibly neuroplastic humans.
Yeah.
Just that's part of our humanness, is being neuroplastic, meaning we can create new neural pathways often, unless there's a deeper diagnosis that's making that difficult. That if we learned this, we can unlearn it. And that looks like trusting yourself to find resources that are helpful. If you're wanting to operate within a Christian lens, then the book Sex, God, and the Conservative Church by Tina Sellers is a fantastic way to find sex positivity within that faith. There's another book called Sinless Sex, which looks at all the sex positivity of all traditions that can help you correct maybe some biases that you picked up somewhere. If this is just from your family of origin and from the culture, then you pick up some sexual health books, not a Cosmo or a Men's Health, but something written by an expert. And then I wanted this little caveat of when I said, unless another mental health diagnosis is in the way. And what's different from good girl syndrome, good boy syndrome, if we take that lightly, like I just am really kind of struggling with accepting this part of myself, it can go to an extreme diagnosis called scrupulosity, which is part of the OCD spectrum. And so, if you were my client, I would really wanting to know, is this a bias, and is this flexible with some relearning and some education, or is this really rooted in rigid cognitions, and there is a stem of OCD called scrupulosity, which can really be tormenting around ideas of sexuality and making us a bad person. And so I would really evaluate with how much distress is experienced when someone can't get over it.
I agree. I like that you bring that in, the OCD, some of those thoughts that can play in there. Scrupulosity is one there. I also think that when we're looking at what does it look like, it can look a lot of different ways, but oftentimes is that there's just not, you feel like something's wrong with you, that you're bad. That's why the good boy, good girl, if the I'm bad or that guilt or shame starts to come in, I am at fault and I need to change me. It can play into those. But I think oftentimes it looks like that.
Yeah.
So I think that we probably want to move to.
We got a comment. Do you want me to throw it up there? Yeah. So we've got Jennifer Seeger, love your podcast. Thank you for the love so much. And then we got a comment here, Kelly Nichols, who's always a great contributor. Whenever I post, she comments and shares.
She's awesome.
Really supportive. She said, when I understood my sexuality was my own and vice versa, my partner's is their own, it made such a huge difference in how I viewed myself and my sexuality. It became such a positive thing that I shared with my spouse. In a way, I always felt like my sexuality was my partner's, and it felt so freeing to know that my sexuality is mine, right? Just like your social self is yours, your intellectual self, yours, your creative self, it's yours, but we share it with the people we love, and our sexual self is just the same.
Absolutely. I love that. Great comment, Kelly. That's absolutely, it is yours to share. I love that. And oftentimes we can feel like it's someone else's. Which I think leads us into this next and final question, which I realize we only have a few minutes left before we've got sessions that start up, but I think that we can address good
we both still work, right? So
yes, we both still work.
You can super chat us, you can Venmo us.
Yes, so we can do this full time. I will talk with you all day, Cammie.
I know, right? Yeah. Awesome.
Okay, the question is, what is the right amount of sex people should be having in a month to consider a good sex life? A friend told me he only gets it once a month, which I'm assuming it is vaginal sex.
And he only gets it.
You what? Oh, yeah, who only gets it.
Yeah. So it's received. It's something his partner has to give him. Yeah.
Yep. And that's the language we're using, right?
So culture.
I know. He states, I was stunned, or they state I was stunned. I told him we do it 2 times a week or more if I get lucky. If I get lucky. Yep. He told me, wow, you're a lucky guy. What's your thoughts? So this is the send to us. What's your thoughts? Side note, my friend has 10 kids, so I don't know when they could do it. He just expressed that he would like to see more love. Wife could go months if he does not say something. I just want to help him. So that's the full question. My first thoughts on this are from last time we were talking on the physical and mental, we start bringing in the mental side of the shoulds. How often should we be having sex for it to be good? Again, there's these judgments that get placed into you can leave a good sexual relationship if you stop doing something. But I also really thought what stood out to me big time was the side note, my friend has 10 kids. We're like, okay, so this plays just, if we would have stopped there and been like, how does he get more sex? This is a huge thing.
Our life circumstances completely impact our levels of desire.
Huge. Very, very much so. And so recognizing it is really hard to say, if I were to go, Cammie, how many times do you have sex? How many times do I have sex? And then we just threw out a number that is trying to give and take a story from a number to then prescribe whether it's good or bad. Braxton's having sex once every 5 months. Bad. Cammie's having sex 4 times a week. Good. That becomes problematic because we don't know what kind of sex. Not even like
good sex or is it bad sex? Yeah. If someone's having bad sex 4 times a week, there's a train a coming.
There is.
It's going to look like a sexual cutoff.
Yep. And you're about to see me or Cammie.
Yes. So if someone's having good sex once a month and they're happy, that's great. If they're having bad sex 4 times a week, I'm still concerned.
Yes, big time. Dr. Michael Castleman wrote Sizzling Sex for Life. And this is a great overall for ages, for questions like this. But one thing I found interesting in there is They went through what is considered sex for these men and women in a research study where they were asking if they'd considered from like kissing, where 1% of men said that was sex, and I think 1 or 2% of women said it was sex, all the way through vaginal penetration, which I was then blown away with 99% of men saying that was sex. So I'm like, where's this one other percent that's like, nah. But that's my own bias. And then anywhere in between. So sex looks like something way more than just where did this genital go with this genital.
I like that you're asking that question, is what is sex anyway?
Yes.
As we adapt over the lifespan, I'm also a lifespan nerd, we're going to have to adapt. Prostates are going to be removed. Uteruses are going to be radiated. Vaginal canals are going to develop lichen sclerosis with a lack of estrogen. ED is going to become more common as we age if you have a blood pressure, cardiovascular issue. And so, if you don't consider a mutual masturbation sex and you're 70 trying to figure out how to work this out, right, is how are we defining sex? Because that real traditional penis in vagina, both climaxing idea is very, very rigid. And like we talked in that book review before about magnificent sex, is people who are having the most magnificent sex have a flexible term of what is sex. They're flexible about that definition, and that helps them have a good sex life. So if we're rigidly stuck on a number, rigidly stuck on penetration, rigidly stuck on once a week, we're not going to be having good sex. And it's not going to be magnificent for you or your partner.
Yeah.
You have to be flexible.
Got to be flexible.
Cognitively, I'm not very physically flexible. Cognitively flexible.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that, so stages of life, like you were saying, and I also think you bring in children into this. There are methods. I've done some interviews. I'm forgetting the person's name, dang it. But one where it's like how to engage in sex while you're a parent. You got 10 kids. That does take away a lot of time. And oftentimes I will find people moving into, well, let's hope we have energy at 10:30 at night before we start off our day at 5:30 or 6. And sleep typically wins out on that. And
good sex takes energy.
Yes, it does. And creating time, creating energy, creating space for that, and what you want and what your partner wants to experience. There's ways to develop intimacy within the craziness of a family that big. And it takes time. We can't wait for it to spontaneously show up. And so that would be one, if you're wanting to support your friend, it would be exploring and helping them identify what is sex? How can you engage in sexual experiences together? How do you experience in solo sex? And what are methods of being able to get kids to other places or be able to get you two away from kids to develop, again, another scene, another environment that can be conducive to relaxation, to get into a sexual mindset when being dad, being mom can oftentimes take over that. Well, what's the next thing? What's the next thing? What's the next thing? And we often see that become a trough within a relationship with kids' age and with length of time until kids start moving out. And they've got a lot of years before they have that 18-year-old and they start coming back to each other if they just let it go. To be like, who are we?
Yeah. And I think numbers do get thrown around. I do know for research purposes, Barry McCarthy and Michelle Davis and those who've done research on sexless marriages, in order to research this, they put a number on it and said, how about less than once a month? And so that kind of gets stuck in people's mind as this is the definition of a sexless marriage, is less than once a month. But they had to have a criteria to start their research. And so if you're having sex once a month or less than once a month, that doesn't mean that we're worried about you. It's the distress that is accompanied by it. Yes. There are plenty of happy couples who may be more demi, maybe more gray, and they're both very happy to have occasional sexual experiences. So it's the distress about the frequency, not the frequency here that matters. But this 10 kids aspect is, I want to throw out a shout out to Esther Perel and her research and the fact that women's desire is very rarely tied to caretaking. And so if they are taking care of 10 kids, it will be very difficult to take care of a husband's needs. So good sex for most women doesn't happen in the mind frame of, I need to take care of your needs. That won't lead to good sex. It needs to happen in this mind frame of, this is for me. This is restorative for me. I enjoy this. This, is pleasurable. This refills my cup. And so often getting to a frequency that's good for both people is addressing that question of, how good is the sex you're having? And are you doing this to take care of someone's needs? Or do you see this as something that fills your cup instead of drains your cup?
Absolutely. Absolutely. If you are curious to find out more and you're saying like, I really want to help them or I want to give them a resource, Dr. Barry McCarthy's book that you were talking about, why can I not read? You just said it, didn't you?
Well, he has a bunch. Rekindling Desire is one.
Thank you. That's the one. That's the one I'm thinking of, is Rekindling Desire.
And Michelle Warner Davis's book is The Sex-Starved Marriage.
The Sex-Starved Marriage. Those are two great resources to be able to explore. We are at 10 o'clock, and Jennifer Seeger has a question. We will pin that. So I've got it pinned, and we will have another Q&A that comes up in 2 weeks, I want to say, right?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Yeah. So in 2 weeks, we're going to have, on Monday, we're going to have another Q&A, and I would love for us to at least bring that up and start talking about that. So stay tuned. We love the comments, the questions. Thanks so much for being here, and we're so excited that we can continue doing this. Is there any final thoughts from you, Cami?
No, just one last plug of, we're going to read together No Bad Parts and review that book the end of the month. So if you want to join us by reading that with our Sexy Book Club, that's where it is. And thank you for exploring with us on Monday mornings.
Yeah. All right. Well, we will see you all next week, Monday, 9 a.m. Mountain Standard Time. We look forward to seeing you all then.
Thank you. Have a great day. Bye.
Bye.